So now that you know the fundamentals of IP address assignment, let's go ahead and let's do a demonstration. Let's take a look at the Mac operating system, the Windows operating system, and the Kali Linux operating system to show you how to access the network properties and configure them either to be static or dynamic. So let's start off taking a look at the Mac OS operating system. So I have a Mac OS virtual machine loaded up here. Let's go ahead and let's minimize the other two virtual machines. And to access the network settings within a Mac, it's very simple. We simply go down to System Preferences, and within here, we want to select Network. And then within here, to access both IPv4 and IPv6, we need to go to Advanced. And so what you're going to notice in here, and let me get my highlighting tool ready to go, we can configure IPv4 here at the top, and we can configure IPv6 down here at the bottom. And then of course we have DNS and some other settings over here. Hardware is going to be our MAC address if we want to go ahead and spoof that, but we're not going to do that in this video. So let me go ahead and get rid of the highlighting. So you're going to notice that by default, IPv4 is configured to use a DHCP server. You're going to notice that it has an IP address from a DHCP server, and then it's set up to automatically configure IPv6. Now, if you want to switch IPv4 to static, we would simply go down to Manual, and then manually type in whatever we want for the IPv4 address, the subnet mask, and the default gateway. Let me go ahead and put that back to DHCP. Now, what we can also do for IPv6, if you want to manually type in our IPv6 address, we would do that here. So we would type in the router information, and the address, and the prefix length. And so remember, the prefix length is going to be, there's a host side and there's a network side to that. Now we can also set this up to do link local as well. So if we only want it to be link local only, meaning it's going to create its own link local address dynamically, similar to APIPA, we can do that as well. But let's go ahead and let's just switch that back to automatically and get out of there. So that's how you would assign an IP address or configure an IP address on the Mac operating system, either using DHCP, which is dynamic, or using link local, or doing it statically. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at Kali. So let me go ahead and make this full screen, and let's talk about Linux. Alright, so before I talk about how we get into the network area within Kali Linux, I want to let you know that I'm utilizing Kali because this is a build that's typically used for ethical hacking, and I work in cybersecurity. Now, if you don't work in cybersecurity, you may be utilizing a different build, a different flavor of Linux, and how you get to the network settings might differ a little bit. Now, with that said, how we get into the network settings here on Linux, specifically Kali Linux, I can go down here to show all applications, and I can simply type in settings and then click on here, and it's going to take me to my settings, and I've already been into the network area, so it's going to take me to that. Another way is if I close this, if I go up to here, this shows a wired network connection. If I click on there, I click on wire connected, and then I click on wired settings, it's going to take me to the exact same area. Now, once we're in here, we want to click on this cog for our wired connection, and it's going to give us a pop-up window, and this is going to show us our assigned addresses. It's going to show us the link speed. So this is 1000 megabit per second. This is going to be our private IP address, our 192.168.0.9 IP address, which is a private class C address. Here you're going to see our IPv6 address. And if you notice, we have an FE80. That's going to tell us that this is going to be our link local address. So remember, a link local address is not routable internally or over the internet. It's only assigned for the specific subnet or specific LAN that you're on. We also have our MAC address, we have our default route, and we have our DNS servers. Now let's take a look at IPv4 because Linux is a bit different from Windows and Mac, because what you're going to notice and let me get my highlighting tool, is that there's an option for link local only. So for Linux, they don't have APIPA. They call it link local only, and it's the exact same thing as Windows APIPA. It's going to use that 169.254, which is assigned to link local or APIPA for IP version 4. We typically call link local a type of address for IP version 6, but they also call it link local on Linux as well. You're also going to notice that we have DHCP and we have our manual configuration. So if I go ahead and switch this to manual, we have to manually type in our information. If we do link local, again, type in the information. But let's go back to automatic, and now let's take a look at IP version 6. So with IP version 6, you're going to see automatic, which means that it's going to try to auto-configure. It's not going to say, if we go back to IP version 4, it says DHCP. As we know with IP version 6, it can have that stateless auto-configuration with IP version 6 addresses. So that's why it doesn't say in parentheses DHCP. If we select this one, then we would utilize DHCP version 6, which we'll talk about later in this section. Again, there's link local, and then of course the manual configuration. So that's how you would access and view and set up that information, specifically whether you want it to be static or dynamic in Linux, and specifically this demonstration was Kali Linux. So now let's go ahead and let's bring up the Windows machine and let's take a look at Windows. Alright, so for Windows Server 2016, there's a couple of easy ways in which we can get into our network settings. And before I get into that, I want to let you know, regardless of whether you're using Windows Server 2016 or Windows 10, the methodology in which you access your network settings is going to be the same. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So the easiest way is to go down to the Start menu and click on Settings. This cog down here is going to take you to Settings. This is also going to take you to Settings. So if I click on here, and then if I go to Network and Internet, click on there, and then if I click on Ethernet over here, and then if I click on Change Adapter Options, this is going to give us a display that shows us all of our network interface cards. Now for this virtual machine, I only have one. And so what I would do is I'd right click on here, go to Properties, and it's going to give me a pop-up. So let me go ahead and close everything and show you another way, because I don't want all those windows popped up in the background because they're a bit distracting. Another way is to go down here. You're going to notice that it says Network Internet Access. Right click on there, go to Open Network and Sharing Center, and click on here for Ethernet. And then it's going to give us that same pop-up, and then I can close this window and it's not as cluttered. So now what I can see here is that we have IP version 4 connectivity to the internet, and there's no connectivity with IP version 6. That's because this is a virtual machine. I don't have it set up for IP version 4 and IP version 6, just IP version 4. Now, if I click Details, it's going to give me some additional information. So you're going to notice that we have our DHCP server enabled that we're utilizing. Here's our IP version 4 address. Here's our subnet mask. Here's our default gateway. Here's our DHCP server's address. Here's our DNS servers. So it gives us our basic information, as well as you're going to notice that this is configured to assign itself a link local IP address. So there's that FE80 again. But again, this is not set up for internet access for IP version 6. So there's no default gateway. There's no DNS server for IP version 6. So we can close out of that. And if we want to change any of the settings, we have to go to Properties. So we click in here, and what you're going to notice that there are two different options for TCP/IP, specifically the Internet Protocol. There's one for IP version 4, and there's a separate one for IP version 6. If for some reason we accidentally go into here and we unclick it, we're essentially disabling it. So just be careful when you do that. Now, we're going to take a look at IP version 4 first. So we'll go to Properties, and let me go ahead and slide this window over. You're going to notice that by default, it's set up to use DHCP. Everything is going to be pulled automatically. If I want to do it statically, then just click there, and then it'll allow me to type in the IP address, the subnet mask, the default gateway, and the DNS server information. And just for best practices in general, you typically want to do that on a server which this is a Windows server, but it's a virtual machine, so I'm not too worried about that. Now, what you're going to notice if I click this back over to obtain DNS information and IP address information automatically, we have this alternate configuration tab. We click on here. What you're going to notice is that it has automatic private IP address, in other words, APIPA. So we can set this up to utilize APIPA, and APIPA is actually, we don't have to do anything in the Windows operating system. This is enabled by default. So if you ever have a Windows system set up for DHCP, this is enabled and it's not plugged in, it should get that 169.254 IP address, and that tells you that it pulled an APIPA address. It configured itself with an APIPA address. So that's IP version 4. If we want to go into advanced mode, we can go into here, but we really don't need to. So let's cancel out of there. Now let's take a look at IP version 6. So go into properties, and this one is more straightforward. So we can either have it do it automatically, or we can have it do it statically. So the IP address, the subnet prefix length, the default gateway, and then the DNS server information. Again, we can go into the advanced settings within here as well, and we can provide some additional information regarding the IP address, the default gateway, and if we have multiple, we can add them in here as well, and DNS server information. So that's how you would get to, and you would assign and configure an IP address either statically or dynamically for IP version 4 or IP version 6 in the Windows operating system. So in summary, we took a look at the Mac operating system. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Took a look at this one first. I showed you how to configure IP addresses in there. Went ahead and then jumped over to Kali Linux. So I showed you how to do it in Linux as well. And then lastly, we took a look at Windows. So that's going to conclude this video. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's video and you learned a lot from it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Now, if you're interested in taking this full course or just learning more about it, check out the video description down below, because I've included a link where you can learn more about the course and enroll into it if you'd like. So again, thanks for watching my video. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next video. Take care.